West Tigers faithful, episode 15. Now, I did say something about last week that I was going to need a mediocre prop reference, but I think that given what's happened this week, we don't sign mediocre props, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm Terrell Reedie, and today I'm actually a man down. Joe McCord, the poor fella, he's as sick as a dog. He's had a tough reaction and he's had a tough couple of days. I hope he's doing all right. Mac, love you lots. Hope you're holding up okay, and he'll be back next week. I find it quite interesting, though, that the fact that Mac is sick on what is probably been the best week that we've ever had this podcast, so I feel for him. All of this said, I'm not going to be here by myself all day long. I've got a special guest coming up later who's meant to help me with the entire episode, but he's a busy man. But we can worry about that later. There's no better way to start this episode than with, we got him, Terrell May. 3-year deal, $2 million across those 3 years, averages out at about $666K a year. But this signing's more angel than devil. This is the guy that we needed in a market where a good front rower, not just a front rower, a good front rower was as rare as hen's teeth. We got one. We got the best one on the market. He's a better player than Leo Thompson. I believe that. So I am absolutely delighted. To recap everything we've said about Terrell, he's a big body. He's 193 centimetres. He's over 105 kilos. He's got a huge motor. He goes all day long. He's got great footwork at the line. He's a surprisingly good ball player. He can throw an unreal right to left bullet pass. He can offload a lot. I think it was 38 offloads in 27 games, which is going to be amazing for our second phase. Look, the thing that he does need to work on is his average carry. It averages out at about 8 metres a match. But look, if that's the only thing that Terrell needs to work on, I'm not too worried. This is a guy that we can build our front row rotation around every single week. He's a guy that you can leave on the field for extended periods of time and only have short breaks. And we can be delighted with that. I'm so happy that we've got him. And the thing is as well is that I believe that he's going to make other players around him better. He makes Royce Hunt tenfold a better signing than what he was a month ago. Because now Royce can be that enforcer, whether it be starting or on the pine. Now, it doesn't matter. It literally does not matter now. I think he'll help Fonua immensely. There's going to be less reliance on him now. There's now, an opportunity for us to have a bit of depth and competition. Somebody's going to miss out, whether it's Sione, Fainu or Dave Clement or Alex Twal or Alex Seyfarth if they elect to play him in the middle. Somebody's going to miss out now. And that's something that we can be absolutely delighted about. This was the guy that we needed. I look at the squad now, and there's only some minor tweaks that need to be made, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But with Terrell, we can be absolutely delighted. I could not be happier, genuinely, with what we've got in Terrell. He's the perfect age as a front rower. There's so much to like about him, and there's so much that we can build now that he's here. Obviously, we were after Kobe Hetherington. I don't know whether or not that deal is completely dead in the water, but I feel like now we can go into the new year, even if we don't sign another middle, with competition for spots. And that's something that I'm genuinely stoked about. In terms of what the forward pack looks like, I've been thinking about this for a little while, and pending that there are no other signings and John Bateman exits stage right as we sort of anticipate he will, I've got a little bit of an idea in my head of what I would like. Now, if Mac were here, he would tell me I'm stupid and he'd probably advocate for other forwards, but this is what I've sort of got in mind. I've got May starting in the engine room alongside Uppy. I've actually got Royce Hunt starting, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Left edge, Sam Weller. Right edge, Alex Seyfarth. And I would have Fonua, the recently re-signed Fonua. We'll get to that soon, in jersey 13. I've been a massive advocate for talent, obviously, to wear the 14 jersey. So I would have him there. Sione Fainu, providing he signs a full-time contract in the next few weeks, I would have him jersey 15. Jersey 16, I would have Alex Twal. And finally, the last man on the bench would be Jack Bird. So straight away, let's look at it for what it is. Terrell, I believe, is a workhorse type. We already have a couple of workhorse types, but they aren't as effective as Terrell. Alex Twal, David Clemmer, and Alex Seyfarth when he plays in the middle of those sorts of guys. So immediately, I think that you need to have a mix between enforcers, so guys like Jared Warrior-Hargreaves and James Fisher-Harris, these forward leaders. You need these sort of impact player guys, so your Spencer Lenyus at Penrith and your Royce Hunts at Cronulla that, play, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 minutes. Short and sharp stints, 15 either side of half-time, scatter defenders, change momentum. But then you have the workhorse types, and as I said earlier, they're the guys that you hang your front row rotation on. And that's what I would be looking at with Terrell. Now, I mentioned Royce as an impact player before, but I think for us, he needs to be an enforcer. I think that we are missing that guy. We've missed that guy for a long time. And to be honest with you, he looks a bit fitter than what he did at Cronulla. He doesn't look to be carrying as much muscle. He's obviously weary of his qualifying times for his Bronco. I think this is a good move. And I'm quite excited by the prospect of Royce. And I think for us, again, we're not Cronulla. We don't have Rudolph, Hamlin Welle, Tommy Hazelton, these sorts of guys in and around the squad. Royce has to sort of be that leader. So that's what I would run with. Royce would only sort of play 20 minutes to start and get sub for hypothetically an Alex Twal, but that's what I would be looking at doing. Fonua at 13. Look, I know that obviously people are worried about his ball playing skill and worried about his defence. With Terrell there, I'm not necessarily worried about it. Terrell will probably wear the 8, but we'll do a lot of ball playing through that middle third and provide a bit of width until a guy like Jack Bird gets on, hypothetically. So I'm not necessarily worried about that with Fonua. You could easily interchange one of those guys. One wears 8, one wears 13 and vice versa. But I think, again, with the ball playing prowess that Terrell possesses, you can afford to start Fonua and not worry about his ball playing ability in the 13. With that in mind, that's what I would run with just for now. In terms of the bench, as I said, talent, I think it's perfect for him to spell Appy. That makes plenty of sense. Appy missed the most tackles in the entire league last year, so I think that speaks to the fact that he was getting pretty tired. If we can utilise talent in the team and we can trust talent more because there's going to be another general on the field 80 minutes a week, then I think that's the right move. And I'm hopeful that bench and the coaching staff see it that way as well. Sione Fainu I have in place of David Clemmer, and the reason I've done that is because I think Sione provides something that Dave cannot. Again, there's only so many spots in this 17 for workhorse front rowers. I think that David's clause will also play a role, to be honest with you. For those of you who missed it, Dave's only got to play 14 games in order for his contract to roll into 2026. I don't think it's the ethical thing to do, but I think that the club will be mindful of that and will steer clear away from that. So I don't see him there. Sione's probably a replacement for Terrell. Sort of 15 minutes either side of half time. He runs straight and direct. That great eye test stat that he's the second straightest runner in the entire NRL is pretty exciting. He can ball play a little bit. He's got amazing footwork at the line and he can offload. Defensively, he's got some work to do. But look, it was his first year in first grade and he had an amazing debut year. I think that, if we were to go and hypothetically sign a Kobe Hetherington or another middle forward, whoever it may be, he'd be the first one to drop back down to reserve grade. But with what it is right now, I think that's probably the move. That's what I would do. Alex Twal, he's your second workhorse front rower. Him and Terrell would probably work in tandem. They wouldn't be on the field with each other too often. But, similar to a lot of these guys that you're seeing come off the bench, Terrell actually did it at Eastern Suburbs before he moved to us. Alex is fit as he can play high minutes and he won't miss any tackles and he won't let anyone down. Obviously, of course, we always talk about it, his average carry needs work and he needs to pull it together. But if Alex has a good run with injuries, he'll be okay. And furthermore, if he's not up to scratch or if he does get injured, then your first drop's David Clemmer. So that's not too bad at all. And again, obviously, I think the club will be mindful about that clause, but they're not going to blood a young kid like a Johansson, hypothetically, when you've got, a former Australian player in David Clemmer there. Last one, Jack Bird. I don't think that Jack will make the starting side. I know he wants to play lock. I don't see it. I'm concerned about his minutes and his output. I think he's a phenomenal player in the sense of his professionalism and his attitude. He's been through a lot. He's dealt with a lot of tough things through his rugby league career, whether it be injuries. He's obviously got rheumatoid arthritis. He's been through a couple of different systems. He's been wanted. He's been unwanted. He's won grand finals. He's played Origin. He's done a lot of different things. But my thing with Jack is simply just we need that guy on the bench. And, he gives us the opportunity to run talent. And then Jack can cover fullback, centre, 5/8, back row, lock. And I think that's a wonderful addition to have. The focus now, I guess, turns to shedding players. There's a lot of guys that, are either rumoured to be moving on or are absolutely being moved on. There are just, dollar figures and releases to sort of come through formally. Adam Dewey and John Bateman, I believe, are probably the closest to the door. The situation with Bateman is untenable, and Adam is on Shane Flanagan's shortlist for the spot in the halves next to his son. So I wouldn't be surprised if that moves on pretty quickly and does come to a head. There's obviously other guys like Brent Naden, who has been effectively confirmed to be shopped. Michael Shamus's article this week sort of gave us a bit of an understanding of why Brent is being moved on. He had that stinker against Newcastle the week after he was given a reprieve to play against Redcliffe and then was sin-binned. He copped the spray off Marshall by the end of it and then refused to shake his hand. Personally, I don't know what was said or anything like that. But from my point of view, when it comes to things like that, Brent was given a second chance, and the fact that he refused to shake Marshall's hand at the end of the game, probably wasn't the right move from him. But then in addition, you've also got guys like Charlie Staines and Brandon Tumeth and Solomon Asakuru who have been rumoured to have been shopped. And they might, back to the Chamis article again. Chamis, I don't know which one it fucking is. Love you, Chammy. I sort of look at this now, and the club is quietly optimistic about the fact that once the big dominoes fall, Ben Hunt, Ryan Pappenhausen, Leo Thompson, these sorts of guys, that there will be a little bit more movement around sort of the lower end players and as clubs look to fill their roster. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a guy like, hypothetically, Brandon Tumeth go to Newcastle because he's an Isaac Moses client. I think that Richo will eventually pick up the phone to Tony Mestrov and play ball with John Bateman going to Manly. I think that, if the Roosters hypothetically, purely on a hypothetical, miss out on Ben Hunt officially and they need to fill a gap, I think they'll come looking for Jaden Sullivan at a bargain base rate. Those sorts of things are going to work in your favour. Jason Riles is obsessed with pace, and he obviously signed guys like Yongi and Josh Addo-Carr and Jack Williams, but don't be surprised if he goes in for Charlie Staines as a depth piece. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be movement. I just don't expect that it comes until January. So, right now it's a bit of a logjam and there's a little bit going on. But in saying that, I think we're in a good place. Obviously, the question now comes down to what would you do with those roster spots? If things were, if players were able to be moved on, and it's going to be interesting because, by sort of February, teams are pretty much locked in. Players are locked in. Very rarely do you see sort of player movement, and doesn't sort of evolve again until sort of round 8, round 9. What I would like to see is investment into the second row. I've been a little bit vocal about this in a couple of different places. If you look at our depth chart right now, it runs Sam Weller, Alex Seyfarth, Jack Bird, Tony Sukkar, and Ruben Porter. And quite frankly, that's just not good enough. That's a concern. I think we need at least 2 back row additions, and I don't really care on what tier they are. Whether it's top tier, so it's a guy with a right hand carry that starts, whether it's a guy that's on the bench, that could have potentially sub Jack Bird, or a guy that plays reserve grade. they just need a couple. It's, we're one or two injuries away from having Sukker and Bird in the back row, and, that's just not good enough for a team that is apparently going to be in contention for the 8. So we really need to be mindful of that. In terms of guys that might be readily available, I'd have to do some looking. Mac and I are going to do a transfer show in a couple of weeks in terms of identifying what we would chase for 2026. So I don't want to give too much away. But what I will say is that there were rumours around one young Harrison Hassett or Harry Hassett at Penrith a couple of months ago that there was going to be a swap deal between him and William Craig. It never eventuated. But guys like that, guys like Dylan Egan at the Dragons are guys that I would look at for that sort of State Cup position. I just think that's a really, really smart move. And furthermore, obviously there's the Pierce Pauls and the Teague Wiltons of the world, but I'm not too sure what the club is going to do there. But again, I don't want to give too much away for this transfer show that we're going to do in a few weeks. Truth be told, we would have done it by now. But all this stuff with Kobe and Terrell and Sione and out the other side, it's, we just wanted to wait until the market settled. And we'll try and get that done before Christmas. But at the same time, the Tigers are moving pretty quickly in the player market front. In terms of other players that I would look at, I'm not opposed to looking at a 13, whether or not we go back in for Kobe or we look at, other guys that are stuck looking for opportunities at other clubs. And Egan Butcher comes to mind. I know he's obviously done his injury, done an ACL, but I think he'll be back sort of in April. I would also look at a guy like Tallis Duncan, obviously, but at the same time, Wayne knows a good player when he sees it. So that's another one to sort of look at. Obviously, Kobe's been discussed. So there's a few options. Brandon Smith, I think, look, there's a lot of rumours around him at the moment, and he's singing Benji's praises. What I'll say about Brandon Smith is he won't be back on the field until July, right? At earliest, I think. Maybe June if he's really lucky. I don't think any external NRL club will look at him, let alone sign him until he gets back on the field and they see how he performs. His manager will not want him to lose any value, and I think he'll just sit there, sip his lattes in Bondi, and do his recovery and come back. He'll obviously do, as he always does, a great job on the Buy Round podcast, so he's never too far away from the media, but I don't see Cheese signing a contract anywhere else, and for the moment. And in regards to the Tigers, it would be a Pascoe-esque signing to see him come back. So come early and to be signed before hypothetically August. That wouldn't be a good idea. Just give me a sec while I have a drink. But we'll just have to wait and see. There's also a case to be made about outside backs, but the more I think about it, I'm not too sure. Obviously, Masi Makasini's coming through, Luke Lauliti's coming through, but the concern for me is the fact that I think that the right edge will be Taruva and Skelton, and that does worry me. I think that they're both wingers, and they are going to have to split them, and that I don't know if Stafford Toa or Solomon Afar-Tape or Josh Felaty are the guy. Hypothetically, if we're going to win more than we lose, I don't know if any of those guys would be my pick. But in saying that, you have a guy like Masi Makasini coming through. What I will say is this, rightly or wrongly, there's been some rumours doing the rounds that as part of the pitch to Terrell May, there was an assurance that West Tigers would be front of the queue for his brother Talon once his court battle and charge and sort of sentencing was handed down. I don't advocate for Talon signing from a cultural point of view by any stretch. But what I will say is that I would not be surprised if the Tigers did look at him and were favourites to sign him once that runs its course. I'm not going to get into, sort of the details around his sentencing and his charge. That's not my place. I'm just saying in terms of speculation and a little bit of rumour, there's a bit of smoke there. That's where I think we'll look. Fonua Bole, 2-year deal. So obviously he was already contracted for 2025, but he's staying for 2026 and 2027. The timing of this I find quite interesting. First and foremost, I think the signing of Terrell May would have been a signal of approval for the current administration and coaching staff. So obviously that would have helped the Tigers a little bit. What I also think is that with Ryan Pappenhausen staying at Melbourne for another year, Medesua Falongo, who is very close mates with Fonua, isn't going to be playing fullback there anytime soon. So any sort of chance to play regular first grade together, there's not going to be that chance for a couple of years. So with that in mind, this is all to say as well that Fonua always said from the outset that he wanted to stay, and to have that formalised is amazing. I'm so happy. Look, we've been critical of his defence on this podcast before, and we have, but there was a period there last year where he even played Melbourne, and there was about a month where he started in the front row and he was incredible. At a time when Stefano was phoning it in and looked like, well, he eventually left, but it looked like at that point that he wasn't going to stay, Fonua stood up and wanted to be counted, and he proved it with his performances. And he's been a priority ever since, as far as I'm aware. And to get him sorted and, to not be worrying about this in sort of January, February and into the season is sensational. There's work to be done on his defence, absolutely. But I think he's 22 years old. Like, he's 22. He only turns 23 in June. When a front rowers peak, typically, age 27, age 28, 29, like, he's so far away and he's just producing. And what I love about Fonua is his variation. He can cart the ball off the back fence and he can scatter defenders. He can put a bit of footwork on at the line. He can offload. There's an opportunity to develop his ball playing skill. There's so much there. And again, we spoke about how Terrell May is going to be a great signing for a lot of players in this team. Fonua is one of them. Play 1, Royce Hunt. Play 2, Terrell May. Play 3, Fonua Bole. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so much to like about it, from that sense as well. And I reckon Fonua was probably licking his lips. I'll just run through the quotes. So, I'm so happy knowing that I'll be here at the club for at least the next 3 seasons. Although it's been a tough few years, I've loved the mateship and resilience in the team. Now it's such an exciting time for us as a club. I just want to keep working hard and continue to improve as a player. And there's the good-looking rooster sitting there in the boardroom. Benj said, we all love what Fonua brings to the team, so this is great news for all of us. And Fonua lives and breathes our team values, and this new deal rewards his continued hard work. He's a great person and a very important part of this club. That's a massive, massive endorsement. Lives and breathes our team values, which is very much, team first, club second, player third, which is unreal. Very important part of the club at 22. That's a pretty ringing endorsement. That's amazing news, and we can be so happy with that. And have him here for the next 3 seasons. He's going to be 25. He's put himself in a good little window for Fonua. By that point, he should be a premier front rower in this game and should be commanding pretty decent money. And I'm hopeful that the Tigers will give him that when the time comes. So we can be delighted with that. At the bottom of that press release, after it was actually going to be an entire segment here today around Sione Fainu and what's going on with him and how apparently the club won't be held to ransom by players and managers and families. Sione has signed a training contract with us, which means he can get back to training as soon as possible, which is awesome news. Look, he's absolutely worthy of a top 30 contract. He had an amazing debut year. We spoke about it. He plays straight. He's got great footwork at the line. He's a very, very astute try scorer for a front rower. His future is absolutely in the NRL, and I think he's going to go to another level again. I think that, playing in front of Jerome Luai is going to be amazing. And, we can be really, really happy with how he's tracking. So that is an absolute win for us. And when one of these spots, whether it's Bateman, Dewey, Sullivan, Naden, Staines, Tumeth, Sakuru opens up, Sione will take that. And that's awesome news for us. So we can be very, very happy. Before we get into the draw, just talking about the Michael Chammas stuff. So the Fat 5 is now the Fat 3 because 2 were given warnings. Those 2 were Brandon Tumeth and Heath Mason. Both missed their time trial minimum time. So disappointing from their point of view, but that's okay. But Solomona Fatape, Solomone Sukuru and Latu Fainu unfortunately failed both skin folds and weight tests plus the time trial, which is disappointing. Look, straight away, Solo and Fatape aren't, sort of in and around first grade calculations right now. Both have a little bit of upside, but at the same time, this is about drawing a line in the sand and setting a standard. So there is work to be done there. With Latu, it was a little bit disappointing to hear that there's a bit of mixed messages going on, that some members of the coaching staff are telling him not to worry about and others are saying pull your finger out. Look, Latu straight away, there were issues with fitness. Everybody knows that. He got through 80 minutes last year once. Which is a massive, massive concern. We really, really need him to springboard into this preseason and get the miles in the legs. And we've been pretty vocal here at WTF about the fact that we need him to do 80 minutes week to week in reserve grade and to build his motor and to build his skills and to dominate that level. So, look, obviously preseason hasn't gotten off to a great start, but look, he's a hard worker. He'll get there. But at the same time, this is about setting a standard and, he's not going to get sacked. He's going to be asked to explain his actions and why he did what he did. And, hopefully that's the rocket up the bum that he needs, because at the end of the day, if he can strip the weight and he can, get himself in the right nick that he needs to be, he will be unreal. So we can be really, really happy, moving forward from a cultural perspective that they are putting a line in the sand, and while a guy like Michael Maguire wasn't afforded that opportunity, Shane Richardson and Benji Marshall won't let the same things happen again. So that's great. Just some little tidbits about the Chammas article. So obviously Marshall's apparently changed his tune at the Tigers, which is interesting. Royce Hunt's come back 3 weeks early, which is unreal. There was all the stuff around Anthony Large about the clause in his contract that he wanted should Galvin extend. Richo said no way. In addition, there's no real guarantee that Lachlan will stay around. It's only the fact that they'll sit down and entertain an extension. So that's interesting. We obviously got a little bit of insight around what's going on with some of our players, like your John Batemans and your Brent Nadens at the moment, and where that's at. Look, it was a good article to hear. The only thing is that on that Footy Talk podcast that Chammas and Weidler do, that there was a little bit of doubling down around mixed messages. But that's something that the club just needs to fix. And if that's leaked out into the media, a guy like Shane Richardson is going to ensure that is fixed pretty damn quickly. So we can be thankful with that. Obviously, there was a little bit of chat around, very, very similar to Brent Reed. He's a very, very pro Shane Richardson journalist. It was very much repeating a lot of what Michael Chammas said. Things like this are good for us, and to have positive stories like this in the press are great. Obviously, we're trying to turn around the Titanic and, laying down some foundations and actually having some standards and some things going on. We can be really, really proud about that as West Tigers fans, that, the club identifies that there are issues and they are going to fix them. That's pretty much everything from the news cycle this week. And my God, there was a shitload of it. But that pretty much does it apart from the draw. So I want to look at it pretty much in full. I'm not going to list every fixture, but we're just going to try and dissect it as best as we can. I'll try and give a bit of an indication on where I think other teams are at and what we're up against. And once we wrap all that up, I'll sort of try and determine whether or not we've been shafted or caressed by Peter V'landys. So obviously we play 24 games over 27 rounds. There's 3 buys. West Tigers have spaced it out as, I believe, 4 Campbelltown, 3 Combank, 3 Bank West, 1 Indigenous Magic Round at Allianz, which is an interesting little tidbit, and finally Magic Round at Suncorp, where we host the Dragons. No better place to start than the first 5. First up, Newcastle at home, Friday night, 6 p.m. We've got Parramatta on the Sunday arvo the week after, 4 o'clock p.m. We've then got the Redcliffe Dolphins up at Redcliffe. That's a 6-day turnaround. We play them on the Saturday. We then go back to Campbelltown again for the second time in a month to play the Warriors. That's an 8-day turnaround. And then finally, for our 5th game, we've then got the Brisbane Broncos at Suncorp Stadium. Straight away, only one of these sides made the 8 last year. Now, I expect straight away that Parramatta will have a better year, and I think Brisbane are obviously going to have a better year as well. But, you know, we're getting teams at similar stages and phases to their quote-unquote rebuild as us. So we can be happy with that. From what I can see, there are no more 5-day turnarounds for anyone. The RLPA must have put their foot down on that. But that's good from us from a conditioning perspective anyway. But it's going to be really, really important that we come out with a positive win record if we are going to do anything of significance this year. You look at the players that we have and the guys that we have at our disposal. You look at the teams that we're playing. A lot of these teams are going to be in similar positions to us at the back end of the season, I think. So just for clarity, I have us in the cluster between 7th and probably 12th or 13th. I think we're good enough to get out of the bottom 4. But where we sit in that, I don't know. But I believe that Newcastle, Parramatta, and Redcliffe are 3 teams that will be in that cluster. Personally, I don't have the Warriors in that. I think losing Sean Johnson, they'll fall behind. And Brisbane, I think, are a pretty bloody good side. I think that straight away, they need to atone for the Demons of Spoon Bowl. 6 o'clock Friday night game at Campbelltown. Straight away, get it out of the way, get it done, win that game. I'm worried about Newcastle's left edge, but we just have to find a way to win. It's super important. We need to start off our season well. Parramatta the week after, we've got a long turnaround, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, but I just think that with Mitchell Moses and Dylan Brown and a couple other guys, they're going to be a bloody tough game. That's going to be good fun. But with the speed that they're going to have and, you know, with the, you know, new coach feeling and those sorts of things, I'm interested to see how Parramatta goes. I'm going to say hypothetically we lose that one. Redcliffe on the bounce. That's another team that's going to be very, very similar to us in terms of ability. I'm going to say that they're going to have a Wayne Bennett hangover. We're going to win that game. We're then going to go 2 in a row at Campbelltown and for our season. We're going to be 3-1 at that point. We're going to beat the Warriors. We're then going to go up to play Brisbane and we're going to have a half-decent effort, but I think we're going to lose that one. So I do think that we'll probably have a 3-2 record at that point. We then play the Knights and the Eels again for the second time in about 4 or 5 weeks. But, you know, you can look at that one or 2 ways. You know, that might be a really, really bad thing, but it might, you know, that you're playing them again and, you know, we as supporters will go, why on earth are we playing them again? But it might also be an opportunity to, you know, fix what happened the time previous, which is good. Anzac round, we've got the Sharks at Leichhardt. We're playing them at Leichhardt again, which is exciting. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about to start with in terms of the beginning of the season. And then the Dragons at Magic Round. Look, this is probably one of the better starts we've had in a decent while. There's a couple of interstate trips, but they're not too bad. Everybody's going up to Magic Round, so that doesn't really matter. We've got a really, really good opportunity to lay down some foundations, and I know that will be pushed internally pretty hard. Again, no 5-day turnarounds. So there's really no excuses. And again, there's not really a team in there that I see as an absolute premiership threat that could absolutely blow us off the park. I expect that Brisbane will have a good year. I've got them around 4th or 5th, but we should be good enough to go with them for the majority of that game. So let's be mindful of that. Origin period. We have been kissed on the proverbial. We have a bye. I think it's over Origin 1 and Origin 2, and then we play the Roosters ahead of Origin 3, and they won't have their Origin players. Now, I anticipate that, look, we'll probably lose Jerome Luai. I think that guys like Uppy and Terrell May are an outside shout, but for the most part, we should be okay there. That origin period is a really, really good opportunity for us to have a good springboard for the run home. So to give you an idea, round 12 before origin, we've got a bye. We play the Cowboys and then the Panthers. You sort of want Penrith around that time. That's the first time that Jerome's going to play Nathan Cleary. Then we have a bye again to cover Origin 2. We have the Raiders at home, then Manly, an away game, and then finally we have the Chooks before Origin period ends. Look, there's obviously the Panthers are a good side in there and the Cowboys are a good side too, but the Cowboys had a lot of players playing Origin this year. I don't anticipate, while the Val Holmes isn't there anymore, but, guys like Cotter and Dearden are going to be there as well. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a couple of players rested. Murray Taulagi as well. Penrith, that's going to be a big game. Everybody knows that. That'll be good fun. We play the Raiders at home at Campbelltown last year and had one of our best performances, if not our best. So that's a winnable game too. As is Manly, we beat those guys last year. And as for the Roosters, well, I think we've got a better spine than those guys this year. And so we should push those guys all the way. So another thing to be mindful of as well. Our last 5 games, well, technically 6, because we have the Bulldogs at home at CommBank before a bye in round 23. And then we have a 4-week sort of run home with the Manly Sea Eagles at that Indigenous Magic round at Allianz. We've then got the Cowboys at Leichhardt, which, hypothetically coming off a bye and then into a Leichhardt game, we should be winning. And then we've got 2 road trips to end, the Raiders and the Titans. I'm expecting us to play really, really well in those games. We had a decent run home last year, and we managed to win 2 of them in a year that we only had 6 wins. I'm expecting, with the quality of the side, to go even better. So I'm hopeful of that. Canberra is one of the toughest road trips ever. Thankfully, we've got it in late August, so the weather will be heating up. And then we've got the Titans to finish. So, probably 2 road trips you probably don't want, but at the same time, we should be doing well. In terms of what I'm seeing, we play the Panthers, the Titans, the Raiders, the Sharks, the Eels, and the Knights twice. Okay, so only 3 of those teams made the 8 last year, and they were the Panthers, the Sharks, and the Knights. Okay, Cronulla are a good team; they're better than us, but we did manage to steal points off them last year. Penrith, we were always going to play twice, but I'm hopeful we always turn up to play against them. We're a better quality side, and Jerome's there. That should help us. And Newcastle, we've got them first round at Campbelltown. We should really be taking points off those guys. Parramatta, again, we play them twice in the space of about 4 or 5 weeks at the beginning of the year. I think it's a good time to play them before they really work out their identity and their play style under Riles. And the Raiders and the Titans are teams that are going to be in that cluster that I mentioned, despite the fact that everybody thinks that the Raiders, are due a down year. Ricky always gets them up. These are the teams that we have to beat, simply have to. It's really, really important. One thing that was pointed out to me about all this is the fact that every single non-New South Wales team in the comp, so Redcliffe, Goldie, North Queensland, Brizzy, Canberra, New Zealand, Melbourne, we've got away games against all of them. It's really, really tough. We play more away games in Queensland than we do in Sydney, which speaks to the fact that the boys are going to be on the road a lot. So while there's no 5-day turnarounds, and I think that the draw on face value has been kind to us, that is a little bit of a concern. I guess you sort of look at the draw and you wonder where we finish. According to the Morning Herald, I don't listen to Fox Sports bullshit. According to the Herald, we have the 6th easiest draw. In comparison, in terms of who's got the easiest draw, the Raiders have got the easiest, despite the fact that they're going to Vegas, even though Ricky's blowing up that they've got to travel a fair way. The Warriors have got the 2nd hardest. Newcastle, the Gold Coast, and the Dolphins also have easier draws. Then there's us. So straight away, I think a lot of those teams are going to be in and around that cluster. That does worry me slightly. It does. But in saying all of that, you look at the top 8 teams from last year that we have to play. The message is clear. With the squad that we have, providing we have a good run with injuries, even if we have a few boys playing Origin, we should have a good year. Providing that there isn't an ACL injury to Jerome Luai, Terrell May, Api Coruscant, or Jareen Buller, or even Lockie Galvin, we should be having a good year. Genuinely, I think that this should be our best year since 2020, where we ran 11th. There's enough strength in the squad. The draw's good. The club's settled. The coach has the players he wants and the coaching staff he wants. So the only thing now is to make good. So that wraps my draw analysis. For the most part, it's pretty good. Those away trips will either make us or break us. It might be something that we absolutely revel in. I'm not too sure. But it's a much better draw, and that start and that run home should be the platforms that we require to springboard into what should be a decent season. I'm probably going to zero in on where exactly I think we'll finish in the next few weeks and months. But again, I still think that with that draw, because it's a bloody good draw, we should be anywhere between 7th and 12th. So if you wanted a prediction, that's the one. Well, I promised you a guest, and it's not a former player. It's not a member of the Discord or the forums or anybody like that. It's my dad, Clayton Reedie. How are you, Dad?
Yeah, great. Good to be with you, mate. And the podcast is going really well. Absolutely love listening to it. And great you're keeping the content going too through the off-season, which is just awesome because there's so much news around, and love being a part of it. Thanks, mate.
No worries. Good to have you. Obviously, you're the bastard that cursed me with being a West Tigers fan.
I did. My apologies.
But what's your West Tigers fandom origin story? Because I know it wasn't a team you inherited off your dad, who was a South fan.
No, Dad was a South fan. I guess as a kid growing up, and you need to remember too, the fact that I'm now closer to 60 than 50. Need to remember that there was no Fox Sports back in those days where you could just watch any team, at any given time. We had no local team where I lived. And so as a kid growing up, I just followed whoever. I just went with the crowd. Typical sort of kid that would just go with the flow with whoever was good. I had a cousin who was also my best mate who was a Roosters fan. So, look, as a kid growing up, I kind of said that I was a Roosters fan as well, which surprises everybody greatly because they are my most hated team now. But sadly, there's photos of me standing around as a young fool wearing Roosters jumpers. But look, how did the love of the Tigers come about? In 1987, I was 17 or 18 at the time. And it was when West moved out to Campbelltown and kind of living around that Macarthur area all of my life. I started to go and see West play at Arana Park every second week and fell in love with them. And so that was 37 years ago I started following West. And I can't be accused of jumping on the bandwagon because I think they were perennial wooden spooners when I decided to follow them. And I remember too as a kid that I played in Tigers colours. So I always had a bit of a soft spot for Balmain. So when they announced their joint venture in 1999 for the 2000 season, it was a marriage that I was very comfortable with and always had a soft spot for the Tigers too. So when they came together, that's where it all began. So I've been a Tigers fan since the year 2000. And the ups and the many downs that comes with being a West Tigers fan, and I can't say I've loved every moment of it, but it's certainly been an interesting ride.
Obviously, you mentioned those old days where we were perennial wooden spooners at Arana Park, and there was always Tommy on the back of the bus, trying to with a megaphone trying to get people to come through the gates to watch the games.
Yeah.
What sticks out in those times? Obviously, any yarns that are obviously good enough to, or appropriate enough to speak about on the podcast. Were you there when Andrew Willis kicked that field goal?
Yeah, I was. I wasn't they didn't have membership back then. You bought a season ticket, which I guess season ticket holders were similar to, to members now that we have. And I was never a season ticket holder, but I did turn up at the hill, and 10,000 people back then would absolutely pack it because they just had one decrepit old stand. And then you just stood on the dirt on the hill. And if you needed to use the toilets, they were portaloos. And they didn't need a bar because back in those days, when I was 17 and 18, and in those early days of West coming out to Campbelltown, you could actually take cans of beer in. The stipulation was you weren't allowed to bring glass bottles, but if you actually had cans of beer, that was okay. You could go through. So we would have many a Sunday afternoon, and your grandfathers, both of your grandfathers, would be involved in this, and scores of mates. We'd go to the local bottle shop and we'd load up on cans and we'd go in and just enjoy. And even if West lost, it was still just a great way to spend the afternoon. But I do remember though that in 1991, I think it was. So, we're still going back a fair while. Warren Ryan came on as our coach.
Oh, the walk. Yeah.
Yeah, and he just recently finished with Balmain, and he was still as sharp as a tack. And he actually got us to the top five, to the semi-finals, which were top five in those years. In 91, 92, I think it might have been. We made the semi-finals, got knocked out as the West Magpies in the first round, but we actually made it. And I remember those days through Campbelltown, just enjoying those games, enjoying the ride, and was just hooked as a West fan for life. And that's turned into a love of the Tigers as well.
Let's talk about, obviously, the wildest ride and the best ride there ever was, and that was 2005. This isn't on the run sheet. What was it like experiencing that year?
I often say it was unique as a West Tigers fan. Part of the reason why it was unique is I've actually often reflected on teams that win grand finals in this day and age. Even back then, generally, you enjoyed the ride in the years leading up to the grand final. So you might have a team that, makes the top 8 one year. The following year, they might make the top 4. The year after that, they might make the grand final, and then they crack the grand final for a win. So there's this gradual build-up of success. And even when you're disappointed when they get knocked out of the semis, your team was still there at the pointy end in September, and enjoying that is a part of the delight of a grand final. No, not that's not the way the West Tigers operate. The way the Tigers operated was we were garbage, won a grand final, back to garbage, and then didn't make the semis again for another sort of 4 or 5 years after we won in 2005. It literally was the shooting star moment of our history, and I remember the run. I remember the run really well into the semis and making it. And a couple of the things that stand out for me was it was my birthday, August the 14th, and it was a game at Campbelltown, ironically against the Cowboys, where if we won that game, we were guaranteed a semi-final spot, and we won that game.
We were at the Supercars that day, weren't we?
We were because as and hopefully this won't turn off half of your listeners, but back in those days we'd go out to the V8 Supercars as massive Ford fans, and we were at Oran Park, and we had a choice: do we go and see the Tigers play, or do we go to the V8 Supercars? And we chose to go and watch Marcus Ambrose run around and probably win back in those days. But we were watching the V8 Supercars, but listening to the footy on the radio.
That's right.
And cheering as they got over the line. And of course, the ironic thing was that day they beat the Cowboys, which guaranteed our semi-final spot. We played the Cowboys in the first semi. I was there that night. Incredible experience when we put 50 points on them. And then, of course, when we knocked them over in the big one.
There was, I remember, obviously I was a young buck, well and truly, but I remember you went to the game where we beat the Dogs 54-2.
We did.
You mentioned the qualifying final. You were also there for the Brisbane match where we won 30-6.
Yeah, the Brisbane game was amazing. It was a Sunday afternoon game, and I've got, I've got 1,000 mates who are Tigers fans, but there was probably about half a dozen of us who went It was a Sunday afternoon game, out of town team, and the old Sydney Football Stadium was absolutely packed to the rafters, and 95%, 35,000 people would have been Tigers fans, and we were hopeful, but didn't really think we'd beat Brisbane, and we ended up putting 30 points on them and winning really comfortably. And the pubs around the footy stadium, the SCG precinct, were absolutely going off before and after. And it was then that game set up that classic semi-final against St George the week after. But unfortunately, your mum had this great idea that we were going to do a holiday to Queensland, of all places. So after that game, we jumped in the car and drove to Queensland. And for the grand final, we were actually closer to Townsville than we were Sydney.
I don't think anybody really knows how old I am, but you can probably do the maths. I think I was about 7 when we won the comp.
Yeah.
So I didn't realise how much of a toll it would have had on you. But now that I am sort of, 26 now and my own man, I can only imagine how torn you would have been through that week. But you managed to put up a pretty good facade. But a mate of yours did tell me that was a pretty bloody tough week of yours.
Oh, mate, it was, because we actually hit the road. We hit the road at kind of 3 a.m. the night after we beat St George to go into the grand final. And watching that game, it was absolutely surreal. And to make that grand final and to see the guys get through was it was an experience. It was a time that I'll never forget. But we did watch the grand final, and we watched it with the people that we were staying with, and to see the Tigers get over the line. Yes, there was adulation and there was that great feeling. I wish I could have been there, but it was just this sense of relief. And I remember saying, I've seen the Tigers win a premiership, I can die happy. Although I wouldn't mind seeing another one before my days are over.
We'll talk about the current stuff in a sec, but I remember talking to Mac about who his favourite player was, and Ben Elias as a kid was incredible for him. My favourite player ever is still Gareth Ellis.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of an idea about who your favourite player is, but I think we've spoken about it in a little while. Who is your favourite Tigers player of all time?
Look, it's a great question. It's a really interesting one. I do love Gareth Ellis. I loved coming when the Tigers were building in 2005. I did love Robbie Farah because he reminded me so much of Benny Elias, and that's why I love Talon De Silva now as a current player. And, possibly not my favourite, but I just love him, because he's a West junior who just shows so much of that flair and potential that Benny showed, that Robbie showed, and Talon's waiting in the wings of a spine which has the potential to be, anything. And I know this is going to sound really boring, but I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I thought about 2005, and I think the player that encapsulates the Tigers' run of that year was Benji, and he frustrates me because he would do 5 brilliant things, but then you have a look at the 2010 semi-final, he kicked out on the full when it was a penalty that really put us under pressure. So he was frustrating. But I remember in 2005, and I was standing in the kitchen of our home listening to Ray Hadley call a game. It was before we had pay TV anyway. And it was the 2005 game against Cronulla at Cronulla where Benji scored that incredible try.
Oh, you mean the footwork.
The footwork
and
that was
and
called.
then threw the ball to Richards, then back to Fish.
I remember Hadley's comment at the time was, West Tigers, you need to lock this kid up to a long-term contract and throw away the key. And it was the first time that we had an absolute superstar player that the kids wanted to be, that the media loved, that represented the way that we played. And it's interesting because a lot of people think, we just threw the ball around. And no, that's garbage. It was, as Tim Sheen said, special plays for special players. And they had enough structure to put them into a position to play heads up, eyes up footy, but it was practiced, but it allowed the Benjis of this world to show their skill, and it reinvented at the time the way rugby league was played.
If it weren't for bloody Melbourne the year after, I think we would have went on a pretty sizable dynasty. That was favourite player then, and he's pretty much nearly everybody's favourite player.
Yeah, and I know it's...
No, but he's mine. Yeah. You know, if it wasn't for Gareth, he's mine too. But favourite player now?
Well, this is yeah, sure. This is a little out of left field, but and I really thought about this because I do have a soft spot for the West Juniors, and growing up in the MacArthur area, I do have a soft spot for the, you know, for those MacArthur kids who come through that are absolutely incredible, and harnessing their gifts and keeping them are the key to our success, and Richo knows that. But the player that I loved a lot last year, that I would have to have number one, you know, as we talk, is actually Sam Fainu.
Great pick.
And the reason that I chose him is because he's got, I love his aggression, and I was a little worried when we saw him playing some trials that the aggression was going to be, oh, gee, I hope you don't waste your talent. But he tempered that. So he's got the aggression, but the lines that he runs, he has the potential to work off Jerome. And he did it last year when he worked off Lockie Galvin to really create chances and tries for the Tigers like no other forward that I think that we've got. And he will link brilliantly with our halves.
I agree. It's a great pick, and, you know, just his effort areas as well, his clean-up work and kick chase. And, yeah, there's just so much to like about him. He's everything that embodies what we want in a forward, moving forward. Obviously, as you said, we've been through the washing machine as fans, and, you know, I've sort of seen, you know, we've been shoulder to shoulder at many losses and tough days at the office, and the occasional win as well. Shane Richardson's in the building now, and, you know, he signed Jerome Luai and Terrell May and Sione Taruva and these sorts of guys. How are you feeling about everything right now? What are you seeing? What's going through your mind?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question, because you can't help but feel optimistic about the season that's coming, but that's tempered by the fact that we've been let down so many times in the past, and
we're the Tigers.
We are the Tigers, and I ask myself the question: how can how can a group of people you love so much hurt you so badly? Look, I'm quietly optimistic, and I think that the roster that's coming together has great potential. And Richo said right from the start that we need to build our club around the juniors, and he has shown that. And you have a look at the juniors that are coming through, and I do love Buller as well, and you can throw in, you know, a dozen others, you know, including Heath Mason, you know, who played in your junior club out here at the Thurmere Roosters that's done so well too. But supplementing that with the superstars that will really drag our club forward. So I'm quietly optimistic, but we are the Tigers. So who knows? Because if there's a way to lose a game, the Tigers will find it. The Tigers are the only team that could seriously be in front with literally 1 second to go on the clock, with a kickoff where they're going to receive the ball and still lose the game. So there's no certainties. The only certainty with the Tigers is uncertainty, but we are certainly building, and it'll be interesting to see how the coaching staff goes as well. Yeah, because we've got an untested coaching staff. I certainly hope that the start to the season that they have will get us on the front foot, so that we can build to something. You know, whether we make the semis next year or not, I don't know. Nobody knows. I do feel confident we will improve. But hopefully all of us, and there are tens and tens, hundreds of thousands of us Tigers fans out there, it'll give us something to be proud of our team with, and we'll move forward over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. There's one last thing that I want to talk about, and it's actually disappointing that you're effectively a week late to the pathways conversation. I should have had you on, but your role as a director of educational leadership in the MacArthur area, the Campbelltown area, has given you this opportunity to, in a sense, to give back a lot to the kids of the Campbelltown community and give them the sports high school that they deserve, and West Tigers and rugby league in general is going to be a beneficiary of that. Can you sort of talk me through what you guys are doing out at Eagle Vale?
Yeah, sure. So for those who haven't heard, Eagle Vale High School, which has actually traditionally had a strong rugby league heritage.
Did Rowdy go? Oh no, Rowdy was Greg's, but
No, yeah, that's right. So St Greg's has traditionally been the private school that's offered scholarships, and their alumni is very impressive. James Tedesco, is one who went there. But there was a year there where Eagle Vale actually beat St Greg's, which, and I can't remember the year, but I certainly remember. The event. But the state government this year announced Eagle Vale High School to be the state's 8th sport high school, and as a result, I've actually worked with the principal there, because rugby league, both boys and girls rugby league, is one of the foundation sports. They've run their trials for that. They've offered places to the kids who are starting in 2025. And what that does is that actually provides a pathway through a recognised sports high school for our kids of the MacArthur area that previously either went to private schools across Sydney, or they needed to take buses and trains to Westfield Sports High School. Okay, so what does that mean for the West Tigers? I've actually met with the principal, Craig Butler, with Betsy and Shannon Gallant and Brett Kamali, because the West Tigers are very keen to work with Eagle Vale High School to provide pathways for Campbelltown and MacArthur kids directly into the West Tigers Pathways program. There's a memorandum of understanding that operates between the school and the Tigers that supports that. We're talking about pathways for kids. We're talking about training. We're talking about sharing facilities. We're talking about coaching. And it just so happens that Harrison Fox is a PE teacher at Eagle Vale High School, and he's also the West Tigers Andrew Johns Cup coach.
Oh.
So there's a really nice link there already. And as I said, it's boys and girls, so providing great opportunities. And it means that we will be able to maximise our chances of keeping our kids, as opposed to going to a Westfield Sports High School where they're snapped up by Parramatta, for example, who then claim them as Parramatta juniors because that's where they went to high school.
Well, that's a massive help. So obviously, there are guys like immediately now in our top 30 squad. So your Lachlan Galvins, your Kit Lalitis, your Talanda Silvers, who are Campbelltown boys but had to get on a train, as you said, and either go out to, well, in this instance, Westfields, but guys like Rowdy and James Tedesco who had to go to St Greg's. This offers us an opportunity to keep those guys close to home and to nurture them and to bring them through, and, obviously for the West Tigers to keep a pretty close and watchful eye on them, eh?
Absolutely. And look, it will bear fruit. There are current players in the West Tigers top 30 who have younger siblings who are already at Eagle Vale High School.
How good's that?
And the opportunity for those kids to work through a recognised and designated pathway where they play with the Tigers Pathways teams on the way through only strengthens our opportunity to keep those kids.
Very good. Anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to touch on?
No, just thanks for having me on. I'm really proud of the work that you're doing. It's a fantastic podcast. Love the content, love the pathways, love the debate, love the work that you're doing with this. I speak for thousands of Tigers fans out there that 2025, fingers crossed, will be a great year for us and the start of something really special.
Bloody oath, and thanks for that. And Mac, if you're listening, and I know you are, you're sacked. No, I'm kidding. Thanks, Dad, and thanks everybody for tuning in. As always, I always say it, but like, subscribe, hit the bell on whatever you listen to us on, so that way you can get your fix as quickly as possible. comment on YouTube, on the forums, anywhere that we sort of interact with you guys. As I always say, you guys are the reason we do this, and we're still powering through, and we should be able to power through till Christmas. So, as always, West Tigers faithful. See you next week. Thanks, guys.